the Dicebearers podcast. We are here with our second episode talking about the army of Thror. I am joined once again by my good friend Chris Stutt. How are you doing today?
I'm very well. How about you?
I'm doing pretty good. Nothing went wrong, I swear. This is the first perfect recording where nothing has happened. I swear we didn't just lose 15 minutes of recording to a file going corrupt. I promise. That didn't happen. Yeah, everything is technically perfect here.
Everything's fine.
Just like the dwarves. Everything's perfect with the dwarves in the kingdom of Thror.
Yep, you
Erebor.
got that. You
That's
got
the
that.
one.
Yep.
That's where we are. Alright, let's get on to the Army of Thror army review, which we'll be doing today.
Yes. I think this is probably my favorite army in the entirety of the good range.
That's a big stake to put down there, Mr. Chris.
Well, I think it's an army that I've been playing for a while, and it's one that I definitely love playing. So I think it definitely holds a soft spot in my heart anyway.
Helps that they're really nice models, doesn't it?
It very much does.
It does.
Yes.
And they're pretty good too, as we're about to get into, aren't we?
Exactly, yes.
Alright, so give us a little bit of yourself, Chris, for those of us who haven't met us.
Yeah, so my name is Chris. We're both Sydney-siders. I'm someone who loves playing all things tabletop. I've been playing Warhammer since I was about 6 or 7, so a really young age. I played a lot of competitive Age of Sigmar back in the day. Lockdown and that sort of stuff has obviously changed a lot of how I've been able to do that sort of stuff, but I have been playing Lord of the Rings for a very long time as well. The armies I enjoy playing is Mordor, Harad, Army of Thor, and Lothlorien. I do play a little bit of the Farhad, Dale, and Eastlings as well, though.
Yeah. I've also been playing tabletop for maybe about 10 years now. Mostly casual, 40k, a little bit of fantasy, a bunch of AOS. Got really competitive into Warhammer Underworlds, won a bunch of tournaments, and then the lockdown happened to stop me winning, basically. I've played Corsairs, Fiefdoms, Survivors of Lake Town, a lot of variety in those, Eastlings, Isengard, Sons of Earl, and the Dark Powers of Dol Guldur. So I've been playing a lot of armies, loving them, loving it. I talk about dwarves here today. I haven't played dwarves. He has. So I'll be here to complain about dwarves, and he'll be here to tell you why you should be a dwarf, essentially.
Exactly, yes.
But let's get into the model range.
Yes. This is the most recent of the Dwarven lines, excluding some of those Forge World things coming through, like some of the Iron Hill Sculpts and that sort of stuff. But I think this is probably my favorite of the 3 Dwarven factions because of how amazing those sculpt looks, especially the Grimhammer profile, I think. That box is probably one of my favorite boxes in the entirety of the game, and it's the reason I got into the army.
Yeah, it's why I almost bought the army. It's why I own Thor and Thrain. I got them as sort of like I'll get into this army in a couple months, and then I think I ended up playing. I think it was Lake Town I did next, or Fiefdoms. But yes, I agree. The Grimhammers are absolutely gorgeous. To the point where I probably buy them to convert other things out of them. Like I think our good friend Eric has a bunch of Khant that he's converted from. At least partially Grimhammers.
Yes.
But you can see that this model range is something you can do a lot with because they are such nice models.
Yes, exactly that. And it's the exact reason that I ended up taking some Grimhammer models and converting them into my normal Warriors of Erebor as well.
You're not quite the biggest fan of the generic Warrior of Erebor. Do you want to go into that a little bit more for us on why you feel that way?
Yeah, so it's not that I don't like the models. I think the models are gorgeous. I just don't like the aesthetic that they bring to the army. When I play this army, I want to play the king and his line and the rest of this amazing, powerful nation that lives under the Lonely Mountain in its heyday. I don't want to play the ragtag remnants of an army after a big worm came and ate half the people and kicked them out of their homeland.
Yeah, that is true. I do think that the Warriors of Erebor are lovely models, but you're right. They're more in line with like a militia than they are a trained army. Like they sort of are like the dwarven equivalent of like Lake Town militia that you'd see from like the Hobbit films or the Hobbit range.
Exactly. And I'm someone who loves the books, loves the movies, loves everything about Tolkien and everything that was created through it. And one of my favorite things that always drew me to the dwarven aesthetic is the dwarven masks and that head-to-toe armored aesthetic that was always depicted. Although it was often described as chain and that sort of stuff, but it's still something I love. And I love having an army that can bring a fully masked up army. It's that sort of army that people look at when you look at the Mori list and they go, man, imagine if I could do a full Khazad list with all the...
You mean Isengard? The best model in the list?
What? No. Actually, they both have that mask.
Exactly.
Yes.
The Isengard do also have that mask, yeah.
It's the mask, it's the armor, it's the everything fitting together into the list that makes it all look so fun and flavorful. And I love having, in my version of this list anyway, all my characters and that being the only ones where you can actually see the faces. They're the ones that bring that variety in the actual faces to them. Whilst a lot of the beards and a lot of the hair and that sort of stuff on the actual warriors and Grimhammers are the people that bring flavor for me.
You're talking about the character models here. I think that they are pretty good for the most part. My only sort of dislike model, I'm not the biggest fan of Thror. He's a bit of an annoying model to paint and to deal with. He's not that bad looking, especially on the table. I think he looks fine. He's just a bit finicky, in my opinion. And what do you stand on them as a general line?
Yeah, so I don't know how many of our listeners have actually painted up these the model range itself, but Thor is a really interesting model. His beard actually sits kind of forward. It almost hovers. Like if this model is
magic, isn't it?
Yeah, it's the Dwarven magic, right? It's that little ego just pushing the beard up off the chest a little bit, right? It doesn't quite sit the same way you'd expect it to sit, and I think that comboed with the shield arm being probably a little bit lower than it probably needs to be.
Yeah,
I think it doesn't make sense for me having a model the size of a dwarf holding the shield down to block a strike.
Yeah.
I think if it was going up and if his gaze fit up and the beards had a bit nicer, I think you would have almost no issues with it.
Yeah, and beside him, I think every other model in the range looks great. I think Thrain, young Dwalin, young Balin, all look great. The captains, I think, are fantastic models, honestly.
Yes, I very much wish I found myself a Grimhammer captain, but
he is a really great model. The great pose, yeah.
Exactly, hey.
All right, let's get talking about the list. So, quick overview. Tell us about your strengths.
Yes, so I think the biggest strength when you compare this list to a lot of other army lists, but especially the other Dwarven army lists, is the heroes. So this army has 5 unique heroes that all bring something unique to the army. It's not just this one is the one with strike, this one is the one with march, this one is the one with that. It's this hero is this profile and does something extra. This hero is something and does something extra. And I love that you can do that, and especially as how cheaply they get bought.
Yeah, your 2 biggest heroes are 120 points, which is fairly reasonable. And they both bring some form of really nice utility, whether it's Thror with his army bonus banner, Thrain with the map-wide standfast. They both get the Ring of Durin. Only one of them can bring it, obviously, but regardless, you'll have it. So yeah, they all have some sort of utility that they bring alongside a pretty solid combat profile. They're never going to match a mounted hero on killing power, obviously. I mean, Thrain is relative depending on what kind of hero. Like, if it's a non-lance mounted hero, he's probably coming pretty close. But, like a lance mounted hero or any sort of big name hero, they're not going to match the killing power. Yes. But they're still going to be a really solid anchor to your line. It's really hard to move, and that brings something else to the table besides just their fighting ability.
Exactly that, yes. Another thing that dwarves bring to the table pretty much every single time is their defense value. Dwarves are usually known as just the tankiest army in the game, and rightly so. Your baseline infantry, defense 7. Very easy to get that by paying a 1-point upgrade foot shield.
Yeah, your warriors are the same defense as most high-end heroes.
Yes, it's fantastic.
The only heroes that have higher defense, funnily enough, are dwarven heroes. And a couple elves. Yeah. A couple of elves, but yes.
A couple of elves. I think Elendo's the 8, maybe?
I'm not sure.
Yeah, it's a couple of heroes here and there that have a high defense, but
it's,
not many.
It's Gilgalad, maybe Elendil, and then dwarves, essentially. Yes. Or monsters.
Yes. Yeah. I think another really big strength of this army is the availability of Piercing Strike on almost every model in the range.
Yeah, Piercing Strike is a fantastic tool to have in your arsenal, especially since you're most likely going to be running an army that's both Strength 3 and Strength 4, because you're going to have a mix of Guardians of the King, Grimhammers, who come at Strength 4 with Piercing Strike, and Strength 3 Dwarf Warriors. So depending on what list you're fighting, you can tailor which models are in the front. Are they using Piercing Strikes? And also, because you're at that high D7, you're less likely to come into a defense value where the Piercing Strike has like a large impact on your survivability. If you're fighting a Strength 3 army, at worst, they're going to be winning you on 5s. And there's a 1 in 3 chance that there's no difference, essentially. Like, your Piercing Strike is essentially free, with no downside.
And it's just fantastic to just have that in, like I said, basically every single model in the army.
Yes. Also, throwing weapons. Throwing weapons are really good. As a Corsair player, I love throwing weapons. Shame you can't throw them at yourself, but regardless, I'll give you credit. You do have a lot of them, and they're pretty good.
Yes, and I think the thing that makes the throwing weapons so good in this army is, as we'll get to in just a moment, you don't have other shooting. this incentivizes people to not play the skirmish game forever with you.
Yes, because since you're movement 5, which we'll get into with the weaknesses more, an opponent can just sit 6 inches away and threaten to charge you with essentially, if you were playing a normal Dwarven army that didn't have throwing weapons, with essentially no threat from you. But because you have, 12 to 15-ish throwing weapons at 750 points, that's something that your opponent's going to feel that over the course of a few turns. It's going to whittle away at them. If they're trying to find the exact perfect position, it might force them to come in a turn or two earlier than they wanted to. They're just not going to be able to mess with you the way they normally would be able to.
Yes, exactly that, right? And, although it may not stop it every single time, it's at least something to give your opponent pause. And I said this last week, and I'll say it this week. Something that makes your opponent think is amazing.
Yes, it messes with your opponent. Also, you've got spears. Khazad-dûm doesn't get spears, but you get spears, which is pretty good. Spears are very good. I think that no one would really argue with the fact that spears are very good.
Yes. The reason why this is in this list review as a strength of the army is, for those who either don't know or haven't really looked into it much before, the Moria dwarves, the either Khazad-dûm or the Moria Reclamation Force, they don't really get access to spears outside of bringing a very expensive pairing of the Vault Warden teams. Thank you. Yes, that's the only way you can bring spear supports into that list. And so for a very long time, dwarves were just kind of known as the army without spear supports. So having spear supports in a dwarf list, whilst to not everyone it's a big deal, to people who played dwarves and have been faithful to them, it is a very, very nice buff.
I think it's very nice to have access to spears. Yeah. Now let's get into weaknesses. You are movement 5. That is pretty bad.
Yeah. Look. Okay. I'll be honest. I first started playing this army, I didn't think much of it. I was like, cool. Okay, I just say make sure I have a character with March and then I'll get over it. It's fine. Then I started playing the game and I was like, wow, this is horrific.
That's how I feel too. whenever I play my Lake Town allied with Thorin and my dwarf is like, I'm going to go help. And then I move him and I'm like, wait, that was 6 inches. And I'm like, I have to redo my whole plan now.
It's surprising how much that 1 extra inch of movement stops you doing things.
I think that the thing that's sort of hard to notice when you just look at it on a profile is the fact that it's 100 to 0. Because when you have like a point of defense, like with D6 to D7, in some situations it makes a difference, some doesn't. But even if it makes a difference, it's only making a 15% difference, right? The difference when you have movement 5 means you can reach. Sorry, movement 6 means you can reach. The movement 5 means you can't. It's 100 to 0. It means that in a situation where, like, let's say I call a combat to get my hero into someone on a strike, now suddenly I can't.
Yeah.
It means you miss out on traps. It means you miss out on charges. It's like, instead of fighting, you just don't.
Yes.
That's the biggest thing you have to sort of consider about that movement 5 downside.
Yes. And whilst I was playing the engagement part of the game, how to actually get my line to connect with my opponents, I noticed it a lot. And it wasn't until I played probably about 10 games on this army that I actually started to notice it again when the lines had met. At first, I kind of just thought, cool, it's only a disadvantage until lines meet, then we don't have to worry about it. But heroic moves, heroic standfast, heroic actions in general, that's when you feel it the most. It's those key pivotal models, getting Thror to move just into range of a banner support with Thrain, or getting something to happen where you can stand fast for a model on objective, or tagging up an enemy hero, or being able to call a strike combat with 2 of your big turbo heroes and try and take someone else out. Those are the things that you just miss by literally an inch and just can't do it.
Yeah, it's definitely something that if you want to play a summon well, you have to be very cognizant of.
Yes.
It's something that's just going to come up. And it's something if you're playing against it, you really need to exploit as well. Dwarves get a lot for being movement 5. They're essentially getting, if you compare them to a Gondorian, for only 1 point more, they're just quite a bit better because they're 1 movement less. So, if you just fight a dwarf army and you don't exploit the fact that they're movement 5, they're probably just going to beat you.
Yes. And that's the thing, right? This is an army that wants to play, a phrase that you and I say a lot, we want to play fair. This list wants to play front to back, you hit me in the front, I hit you with my front, and I win because I'm a dwarf line.
The army is very one-note, essentially, is what we're coming to. The army has a playstyle of, it runs, it bashes into you, and it hopes that dwarf win. Especially because, as we already talked about, there's no shooting, and there's no cavalry. Yes. You don't have any sort of tricks or pressure on your opponent. You have throwing weapons. It's good. It's going to come into account maybe 1 turn or 2 turns where it's going to be annoying to your opponent. They have to deal with it. But it's nothing compared to, an army with, 10 strength 3 elf bow shots or having, cavalry on the flank constantly threatening like a rear charge. You're very one note.
Yes, and I think the biggest thing with the throwing weapons is, yes, throwing weapons are fantastic because you get the availability to play the skirmish game if you want to, but that movement 5 means that you can't really play that skirmish game that long. If you are trying to play the skirmish game of, I'm going to hover in that super close range and do that throwing axe for as long as I can, your opponent can just outwalk you.
Yeah, they really can. They can outmaneuver you. They can get onto the objectives and then just try and run forward, die in front of you, and stop you getting onto them. There's a lot of things that people can do against you if you're not careful.
Yes.
You need to understand that you have a single strength, you need to abuse it, and you need to stop your opponent from, abusing you, essentially.
Yes, basically, yes. So that's the big strengths and the big weaknesses of the list, yeah.
Yeah, that's a quick overview. I think we're going to jump to a little break, and we'll be right back going over each of the profiles, talking about them, and getting into some lists.
And welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. So let's dive straight into our profiles, and we're going to start with the army bonus itself. So friendly Erebor dwarf models count as being in range of a banner if Thror is within 6 inches.
It's really good. Thror is a 6-inch banner that doesn't die.
Yes. And most importantly, here's a 6-inch banner, not just a 3-inch banner. It's actually quite a considerable profile in terms of how much of your battle line you can actually reach with it. The only downside I'd say with it being on Thror, instead of being able to pick maybe if it's one of his line, that could be the banner.
It just means you have to bring Thror.
It does mean you have to bring Thor, but it also means that Thror, the way he wants to play in the game, you don't quite get to do it exactly how you want to, because he's also your banner. You need to be cognitive of where your roadblock is going before you actually place it relative to the rest of your list.
Yes, one of the things Thor really wants to go into a hero that can't kill him, who's more expensive.
Yes.
He can't take on the super big boys like an Azog or an Aragon because they kind of get around his gimmick, which is him being D7. Which let's get into Thor himself.
D7?
Did I say C7? D9. D9. Thor. He's D9. We can run us quickly through his profile as we talked about him. Go ahead, Chris.
Yes. So he is a dwarf Erebor infantry hero. He's a hero of legend, your only hero of legend in the list. And for 120 points, you get movement 5, fight 6, 4+ shoot, but cool. His strength 4, defense 9, which is amazing. 3 attacks, 3 wounds, courage of 6. He has 3 might, 3 will, 1 fate. He has heavy dwarf armor, a sword, shield, and the Arkenstone. The Arkenstone allows Thor to pass his fate roll on a 3+ instead of a 4+, but here's where the really powerful part of this model comes in. If he rolls a 4 or better, there is no need to expend a fate point at all, which means that 3-3-1 profile could literally be 3-3-9 in a game, because you passed 9 fate saves on a 4+.
And the other brilliant thing about it is, if you burn might to go to a 4, you get your fate back. So you roll a 3, oh well, 1 might refunds a fate. It's
Exactly.
pretty good value.
Yes, it's phenomenal, yes. He has 3 heroic actions. They are Strike, Strength, and Challenge. 2 of those are useful. Strength is a little bit...
Yeah, challenging another hero of legend. I don't know who you would want to challenge, though, who's in that legend tier.
Quite a lot of people.
Who would you challenge?
Literally, most...
Anyone who's not Azog or Aragon.
Basically, unless you're Azog, Aragon, Smaug, or
I'd
Sauron.
challenge Smaug, he'd win. Did you see the movie?
Listen, mate, okay? Unless it's someone turbo like that, challenge them. You'd be surprised the amount of times you see someone like a Saladin just go, oh, I guess I'm a red ally to my list now.
Yeah, you can, especially if you can get him into the hard part would be getting him into those heroes. If your opponent is cognizant of the fact you have challenge, they're not going to let you near that hero. They're not going to let you get that challenge off. But if you get the chance to do it, it's really nice. Because they're going to say no, probably. They don't want to fight Thror if they're those kind of mid-tier heroes of legend.
Yes.
Especially the fight 5 ones, like a Dalamir, like a Saladin. Those kinds of heroes really don't want to fight Thror because they're just going to lose.
Yes.
And even the bigger ones, they're just going to not kill him, and he's going to still be a 6-inch banner for your army.
Exactly, yes. I think you'd be surprised how many times you get a challenge off. I don't think people understand what challenge does.
Yeah, it's like this sort of meme ability but then when it comes up, you're like, wait, this is really scary.
Yes, and I think people just don't understand that, In the right circumstances, challenge can be one of the most effective tools in the game.
Like when Shagwar goes around killing every single captain in
Yes,
the game.
it's amazing. I do it all the time when I play Shagwar.
Challenge does have some utility in it, especially on a hero like this. The tough part for him is having to find another hero of legend. Like if you're playing against an army that's on a hero of valor, he just doesn't do anything.
Exactly, but that's not the end of the world. Like the rest of his profile is amazing.
Yes, yeah, that's we're just talking about one very specific niche but very powerful thing he can do here.
Yes.
Now let's talk about his little upgrade that he brings for us.
Yes. So this is an upgrade that is for Grimhammers that you can bring in his warband. For 1 point, you can upgrade them to a profile called Guardian of the King. Guardian of the King has a strength value of 4 instead of 3. It's phenomenal.
Yeah, +1 strength for 1 point is really good, especially going to that strength 4. It means that those heavy armor, shield D6 armies just crack. It also means that you can go to strength 5 with a pierce, which means against those lighter armies like a D5 army, like something like a Dale or a Lake Town, you can just absolutely shred.
Exactly. And Grimhammers, as we'll get into in a little bit, are also a hand-and-a-half weapon. If you really need that killing power, piercing strike, 2-hand, go all in on it, and just absolutely crunch something.
And we've got one more piece of equipment. Let's go over the Ring of Durin.
Yes, so the Ring of Durin is, in my opinion, one of the most powerful things of dwarf lists. Essentially, once per game, the bearer of the Ring of Durin can reroll a single priority roll. And it has, similar to the One Ring, it has a little tier list of who has the ring. So if Durin, the King of Khazad-dûm, is in your list, then he carries the ring instead of Thror. If Thor's in your list...
Thror and Kim?
Well, they're just not...
Wouldn't it be red allies?
Yeah. You can do it. I've seen people do it.
You've seen people do it.
Yes.
You've seen some weird things.
Yes.
Well, he can shield for 6 dice. That's pretty good.
Yes, he can.
Yeah.
He's actually very good at just sitting in front of things.
Yeah, again,
Yes.
it builds more into that blocker role. His killing power is his sort of one main weakness, I guess. It's very mediocre.
I mean, it's just a straightforward 3 attack profile.
Exactly,
right?
which is very mediocre.
Yes.
Like,
it's nothing to shout about. It's not bad. I think it's reliable enough to get that 1 kill a turn if you're going into the 2v1s.
He's gonna you put him into 2 if there's no hero for him to block nearby, he goes into 2 warriors, he on average kills 1, if he gets lucky he pops 2.
Yep, slap a spear sport behind it. That's 5 dice, you're sailing.
If you're fighting a fight 3 army, you can feint.
Yeah, that's actually quite
his spear support will be fight 4. That'll up his killing power a decent amount. But yeah, he's gonna slowly kill things. Yes. He's never gonna die. The D9 means that even strength 4 armies are on 6s 4s against them. Strength 3 armies, which is what the majority of troops are 6s 5s. You know, those strength 4 lance heroes are still rolling 5s 3s.
Yes.
So he's just very tough to displace.
Like 5s 3s, if you're rolling 6 dice into them on the charge after you knock them down, that's probably what?
1 wound?
Just over 1 wound on average.
1.2ish maybe?
Yeah, so let's say it's 2 wounds. And then on average, I block with the Arkenstone.
All of it.
Yeah.
That's average.
my average.
It depends on who's rolling. But yes, the Arkenstone combined with that means that it's very hard to kill him.
Yes. And the only other thing I actually will say is when I play this profile, he is usually the last model in my army to spend might. If I'm running a 9 might army, I will literally have 3 might left in my army and it all be on Thor, just so I continue to roadblock and just be that pest in someone's army.
He's also, another thing to note, he does have strike, but I think not using it is often correct.
Yes.
Like if a fight 5 hero charges him and calls a strike, if there's not like a 6-man trap that's about to go like full hard roll 30 dice on him, you don't need to call a strike. Like you can just sit there and just see what they roll in their strike and probably just cop it because he doesn't need to call the strike back. And that way you can sort of burn out your opponent's fight. And because he's on that fight 6, which last week we also talked about this, fight 6 is really big. There's very few heroes, like outside of the more elite lists, like this dwarf list or like an elf list, that are sitting at fight 6 base, right?
Exactly. Yes.
It's like a 170 point hero range, you know, unless you're talking very, very like niche heroes. Like these guys, in fact. These are some of the few heroes you're gonna get for this point range at 5/6. Yes. Which is something to note. It's very nice to have.
Yes.
Now, on to our next fight 6 machine. Now, this is the man you want if you want something dead. We get Thrain coming in at 120 points, just like. Is that what is their relationship? No, what are they?
Thrain, son of.
Thrain is son of Thror? Yeah. Okay, just like his dad coming in at fight 6 at 120 points. Look, I don't know, listen, Dwarf.
Nah, look, we're professional.
You're a professional.
Here. Used to be.
I'm a something. Again, stuck at that Dwarven move 5, hitting on that fight 6 we just talked about. Shoot value 4, not really relevant. Strength 4, D8, so not quite as tanky. 3 attacks, 3 wounds, courage 6. Pretty solid, same as Thror. 3 might, 3 will, 3 fate. So while he isn't as high defense and doesn't have the Arcanstone, he does sit on that nice 3 fate, which is quite tough to move at D6.
D8.
Listen.
It's fine. It's fine.
I play low D armies. D6 is high for me, okay?
Yeah, that's
like
fair
most
enough.
of my heroes don't even hit 5.
Yeah.
So, Thrain comes in with heavy dwarf armor and a Master Forged 2-handed hammer. Now, a Master Forged weapon means that it has no -1 for two-handing, which is where his killing power comes from. He is only Strength 4. He's not a Strength 5 like someone like Dane. But Strength 4 two-handed means that he's killing most troops easily on 4s, some troops on 3s. He's hitting most heroes on 5s. Pretty solid. So, heroic actions, strike, and defense. Both really, really good.
Yes.
The defense is really nice because there's a whole bunch of situations where it has him rolling 6s. If he's trapped by Strength 3 troops and like one hero and he calls a defense, those Strength 3 troops are going to rolling 6s.
Yes, and I think that's the thing that makes defense so good, is on either super low defense heroes
Or super high.
Exactly. All those middling defense, I'd say middling is defense 6, 7, or 8. All those models, it's not fantastic on. If you're defense 4, defense 5, and you have it, phenomenal. If you're D8 or higher, phenomenal.
Let's move on to the fact that he also has heroic strike.
Yes.
So he does have access to threatening a lot of heroes. Again, sitting on that base fight 6 means he can walk into heroes and just call a strike. Or not call a strike. I think against mounted heroes is where you kind of can do that. Against the mounted fight 5 hero, on the turns you charge, you walk into him and you don't call a strike. And then when they charge you and they actually have a threat back to you, is when you call those strikes back.
Yes. Or even if it's a lance hero, that's when you might pop that.
Yeah,
cheeky
exactly.
defense,
Exactly.
right?
When that, defense would be pretty good too as well, yes.
Yeah.
If you bring him and there is no Thror or Durin, he gets to carry the Ring of Durin, which we talked about, gets you that reroll. So if you're just running maybe at really small points, although I think Thror is like auto-include, but maybe if you're allying him into another army, is where you could sort of look at bringing the Ring of Durin on him. Like if you want to ally him to Iron Hills, because Iron Hills have a different keyword, they don't get access to Thror's banner.
Yeah, exactly that.
But
right?
we can talk about that. However, his probably best rule, standout rule, beyond his killing power, is Durin's Heir. Thrain's Standfast is map wide. Every dwarf model on the battlefield is automatically affected, including other dwarf heroes. That is phenomenal. It means you basically only need one hero to pass Standfast for your entire army.
Yes, and I think there are two really important things to note in this special rule. The first one is that it's dwarf. It's not Erebor dwarf, it's just if you are a dwarf, you get this Standfast. And the other big one is its heroes, which means you can do that sort of Huey-style daisy chaining of Standfast.
They don't need to daisy chain.
But you don't even
Everyone
need to
on the
daisy
map.
chain.
Yeah,
Exactly,
And,
right?
and it, to my understanding, isn't even bound by line of sight. It's just every dwarf on the battlefield.
No, I believe Standfast...
in addition to all the normal rules, Thrain passes the Standfast, every friendly dwarf on the battlefield is automatically affected.
Yeah, but Standfast still requires line of sight.
But I'm not sure. I need to look into the FAQ on that.
Yeah, either way.
It says, but regardless, the fact that it affects the whole board is huge.
Is huge, especially when you're running those 1 or 2 dwarves off onto those
Hey,
objectives.
if someone knows, does Thrain's thing work without line of sight, you should leave a comment. And while you're there, give us a like and a subscribe. It'll make the algorithm really happy with you.
Exactly that, hey.
And make Eric happy with me. So
Yes.
it's a win-win, right?
Alrighty, we have one more special rule that...
It's a pretty minor one. But yes, if Thrain is fighting Azog, he gets to reroll all his failed win rolls.
Or any model in the same army as us.
Oh, wait, I didn't read that second part. That's pretty good.
It is actually not bad at all. I agree, it definitely doesn't come up very often, but in our community at least, there are 3 players that play Azog and his legions.
It's a pretty popular army. It's very strong.
Yes. Yeah. And so just having this cheeky model who, obviously you have to kind of avoid Azog properly if you're playing into it. Because I don't particularly think Thrain wants to tap Azog unless you have a reason to.
No, I think you will know. I think we all watch the movies. We know how this goes for the dwarves and they fight Azog one-on-one.
Exactly, but it just means that you're crunching through the entirety of their list so reliably with a +1 to wound and failed rerolls.
You're winning the Hunter Orcs on 3s rerolling.
Exactly, right?
You just make Hunter Orcs vapor. Like, just...
Yeah, it's fantastic. I love it.
Yeah, so Thrain, very solid hero option. Again, only 120 points. That's the thing. These heroes are fairly cheap for what they bring.
Yes.
Because they don't have some of the upsides of like a mounted hero, but because of that, they get to have other upsides while staying relatively cheap.
Exactly, yes.
Now, on to our third hero, young Thorin Oakenshield. Go ahead, Chris. Hit us with it.
So, young Thorin, he is a dwarf Erebor infantry hero. He's a hero of valor. He's only 100 points, which is amazing for the profile you get, which is a movement 5, fight 6, 4+, strength 4, defense 7 starting. He can upgrade that later, as we'll see. He's 3 attacks, 3 wounds, and courage 6. He has 3 might, 3 will, 3 fate. He has dwarf armor and a sword. He has access to strike, strength, defense, and challenge. And his options, his war gear options, is the Oakenshield, which is a 5-point upgrade. So for 105 points, you get that profile with the Oakenshield, which is a shield that additionally, when I shield in a fight and I win the fight, I may also make a single strike at his strength. Essentially, it means if you're surrounded, if you're genuinely in risk of dying or need to just shield to keep your dice up and that sort of stuff, you still get to make a single strike. There's a couple of models in the game that have rules like this, and they're all phenomenal. He has one other rule, which I absolutely love. It's called 2 Arms, which is a once per game special rule. When moving young Thorin Oakenshield, the controlling player may declare 2 Arms. At the start of the following fight phase, all friendly Erebor dwarf models within 3 increase their strength by 1 for that phase. In other words, he basically gets every model on your list up a strength in 1 fight in the game.
Well, within 3 inches. It's a fairly small bubble, but that is still very powerful. It means you can go to strength 6 Grimhammers if you really want. You can wound D6 models on 4s. 3s even if you two-hand. If you're really just like, you've decided that this turn is going to be the biggest
turn of your entire life.
Yeah, you're just you're feeling it. You're gonna win every fight, and you're just gonna go boom, 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 and just remove their entire line.
Yes. The thing that I found with this profile and with that special rule is using it to do the coup de grace on enemy heroes. You pop it, you go into one hero, usually a captain or a non-striking hero, with him and Thror and Thrain, or just 2 of them, something like that. You call the strike combat. Even a couple of Grimhammers, stuff like that. Call your strike, call your combat, call whatever you need to get that going, and just explode. Like, do the 7-on-1 style heroic combats and just pump that damage across your line.
Yeah, it's a pretty solid ability, especially, again, as we said, he has only 105 points, which is pretty cheap for what you're getting. Again, basically, because of that lack of amount, because of that lack of killing power in that most, like, extreme sense, these heroes get to have these sort of fairly nice side abilities that give them a lot of utility and flavor.
Exactly that, yes. And I think that, although I don't bring Thorin nearly as much as I used to anymore, I find Thorin is one of those really powerful centerpiece-style heroes, especially if you're looking at scaling down your points. If you're playing a 500-point game, him and Thror are a phenomenal 1-2 punch.
Yeah, I do think he's a very solid profile, but the thing is, he's in a list with a lot of really good profiles. That's like, in a sense, if young Thorin was in most other lists, he'd be like a top pick.
Yes.
But the problem is you have Thror and Thrain, who are like top picks, you know, like extra top.
Like, he's the A-tier hero, and the other 2 we just had previously are the S+++s, right?
Yes, they are fantastic heroes.
Yes.
Let's get on to Balin.
Yes.
Alright, I'll go through Balin. He is a 55-point Dwarf Erebor Infantry Hero of Fortitude. He is not quite as good as the other heroes of combat, sitting only at Fight 4 and 4+ Shoot value. Strength 4, D5, 2 attacks, 2 wounds, Courage 6. Courage 6 is pretty nice, especially against those Terror Lines, those Harbingers of Evil. 1 Might, so only 1 Might, not best. 3 Will, and 2 Fate. He has Dwarf Armor and the Sword Mace. The Sword Mace lets him have Feint or Bash special rule. So it's not the most killer ability, but having access to Bash on a Strength 4 hero, not bad. But his heroic actions, he's got Heroic Defense, pretty solid as we talked about. He is one of those lower defense heroes where Heroic Defense is going to get a lot of value for him. It's going to make basically everything, go up by 1 or 2 to wound him, which is really nice. And with that 2 Fate, he has like a decent-ish wound pool. However, his standout rule is the Young Sage. In the priority phase, young Balin may expend a point of will to enable his side to reroll the D6 in their priority roll. Why is this really good?
This rule takes this profile from like, oh yeah, It's okay.
Pretty mediocre. Honestly, without it, he'd be like a 45-point hero.
To, in my opinion, one of the strongest rules in the entire game. Moving around and playing around priority is something that a lot of players, experienced and newer players, really do struggle with at certain points in the game. And just being able to have the reliability on your side of that dice roll to say, hey, I didn't have priority last turn and my opponent just rolled a 2. I can just roll this again if I need to, even if I get a 1. It's a 1 in 36 chance to just snap that priority straight away. Or if you don't want it, your opponent just rolled a 5 and you rolled a 6, just re-roll it. Like, it's insane the amount of value you get out of this.
There's a lot of things this rule can do, and it just feels very oppressive to play against in some senses, because you get that dread of, oh no, I rolled it. You roll a 1, and then I roll my 2 for my priority, and I get this dread of like, he's gonna re-roll.
Yes.
It's a very tough rule to deal with because it feels so oppressive, and it combines really well with the Ring of Durant because
suddenly you have 4 ways and an army.
You have 4 rerolls essentially. Yes, it's really it's just a really most games you might use it 3 times. You're not going to use all of it, which is okay because it means you can kind of if you're feeling like, oh, I'm not really going to need more than 1 of these left, and you've still got your Ring of Durant, you can just throw Balin away. You can just be like, he's going to go into fights, he might die, he might kill something. He's very cheap, so I'm not too concerned what happens to him. He is low fight, he's not the most killy, but he'll contribute enough to get his points back pretty easily, because he is very cheap. That's the other great thing. He is 55 points for Hero Fortitude.
Yes.
That is very nice to have in your list.
He is your cheapest way of bringing troops.
Yes, he is.
Yeah. And I think that comboed with that special rule just turns this model from like it's pretty good to a, oh my gosh, why is he not in every single list?
He's in all of your lists.
Yes, that's true. But hey.
Yes, he definitely does go into that sort of very super efficient high tier hero in terms of high tiers and rating his power level.
Yes, exactly that. Yes. His one big weakness, I think, is that defense value. With it being stuck at defense 5, he's ironically the lowest defense model in the entirety of this list.
He is, yeah. He is the kind of model where I feel like he charges 2 dudes and I actually feel like, I might just kill him this turn.
Yes. The 2 wounds, 2 fate means that he can feel moderately safe, and that 1 point of might for that defense can be really clutch that 1 turn you need it, right?
Yes.
He can be that 1 turn roadblock if you need him to be. Yes. I find he's most useful as that sort of second rank model for the first couple of turns of combat, and once the lines kind of intermingle properly and the battle line starts breaking up, that's when you send him in with a Grimhammer friend.
Yeah, and the fact that he has 2 attacks means he will do pretty well in those fights. He gets the reroll from Thror.
Exactly.
Yeah, he does have a decent amount of impact. And again, he doesn't have to kill a lot of models to pay back his points.
Yes, and I find just being able to control tempo with the game almost pays back his points.
Yeah, the rule itself, the Young Sage rule, probably pays most of his points off already. Exactly. Even just considering the fact that you have throwing weapons, if you win 1 priority roll and you get a couple kills off throwing weapons you otherwise wouldn't have, that's half his points back, depending on how much you kill with it, really.
Exactly.
What you kill with it, right?
And I think this army is one that really utilizes this word tempo more than most other armies in the game. What I mean by tempo is if you can take a bit of a lead in the game, let's say we both have 40 models on the table start, and when combat lines meet, I get 3 kills up on you in the first turn of combat. I want to then win my next priority, get 1 or 2 kills with throwing weapons, break that line up even further, advance that kill lead to 6 kills by the end of that turn, and then try to win that next priority, bring that kill lead up to 8 turns, and by that 3rd turn of being able to do that successfully, you've snowballed the game to where you're going to be trapping, and you're going to be really exponentially killing your army. You probably break them that turn.
Yeah, this list can really snowball a game if your opponent doesn't set up properly.
Yes, I had a game a little while ago against Alexa where he was running his Corsairs, and this list just plowed through the front of him in a way that I honestly was not expecting.
Won every fight, to be fair, but the list can, because it's very hard to kill back. So if it gets a kill lead, if it's got more dice than you, you're not going to be able to kill it fast enough to win the fight, to win the game, essentially.
Yes, and so obviously it's not every list that you play against gets to play you like that, and you get to kind of just get that snowballing effect going. But even if you're using that reroll to lose that priority roll, to be able to say, hey, I'm fine letting you just blow resources here. I'm fine to let you commit to me however you want because I'm on the objective. I want to see where you're going so I can plug the gaps with my heroes. I want to be able to react to you.
I think that choosing to lose is actually a really big part of it. I think especially when you're playing against armies that really want to maneuver based on what you do, like hiding armies or cavalry armies, just choosing to lose a priority can just waste the turn of the game for them. which can be a really big deal because it can be an extra turn for you to move into position.
Yes, and it's exactly that, right? I use this reroll. I use it for one of two reasons, basically. I use it if I want to lose priority. I'll almost always roll it. And the other big reason I'll use it is if I want to win that priority, but I'm not looking to spend might that turn. And the reason I want to do that is I want to bleed my opponent of their resources, their heroes that are fight 5 with strike, so that they can't do anything as the game gets later and later into my big beat stick heroes. Things like that.
Yeah, I think that Balin is a very good one. I think we've talked about him a lot. Yes. He's a very unassuming profile. When you just like scroll through the book and you're like, oh, this Balin, whatever. Yeah, and then you like sort of think about him and you're like, oh, that's really good.
Yes.
But let's get on to our next profile. Another young dwarf, Dwalin. Go ahead, Chris. Hit us with him.
So Dwalin is a Erebor infantry hero of fortitude. He's 85 points for the privilege, and he is a movement 5, fight 5, 4+ shoot value. He is strength 5. He's the only hero in the list that's strength 5 native. He's only defense 6. He has 3 attacks, 2 wounds, and a courage of 6. He has 2 might, 2 will, 2 fate. He has dwarf armor and 2 axes. And he has 2 heroic actions. Those are heroic strike and heroic strength. Now, the part of his profile that really makes him powerful is his special rules. So the first one is fearless. A fearless hero is phenomenal, full stop. And having it on a 3 attack strength 5 profile means that you can charge terror, not care about it. You can charge a troll and say, hey, I'm just going to beat you up in this turn. It's going to be fantastic.
He does wound a troll on 5s.
Yeah. And if he's standing next to Thorin, who pops...
and then he piercing strikes strength 7, yeah?
He's suddenly wounding the troll on a 4+.
He can hit a very high strength value with that piercing strike.
Yes, it's insane. The other special, or one of the other special rules he has is Weapon Master. Young Dwalin is never considered unarmed and never suffers the penalty for the -1 to dual roll when fighting with a 2-handed weapon. So every single iteration of Dwalin has this special rule. Essentially what it means for this Dwalin, without a 2-handed weapon, is that he's never considered unarmed. The other 2 profiles where you get him, it's phenomenal because he has a 2-handed weapon built into his profile. Unfortunately, that makes this a bit of a weird profile on the list, but his final rule is something that makes up for it a little bit. Before making a dual roll, young Dwalin may choose to reduce his fight value by D3, exactly as if he's fainting. If you do this, young Dwalin may reroll all failed to wound rolls in the following fight phase.
It's super faint.
Yes, exactly.
Look, I didn't think too highly of Dwalin for quite a while. Like he's decent, but when you compare it to the other big heroes in this list, like the Thrain, the Thror. Well, when I think about Dwarven Fury and what you can do with this, I think it's pretty good. Like again, the tricky part is it's very similar to Thorin with him, where it's hard to find which hero you're dropping to bring young Dwalin.
Yes.
But I think if you're playing like 400 to 500 points, him and Thror is a really solid hero setup. Because if you can get him and Thror into someone, young Dwalin just does the super feint. He goes to strength 6 and he just goes and just
just eat something.
Yeah, you can output, especially if you get a trap.
Yes.
If you can set up a trap for young Dwalin with Thror and him, like you can.
Why set up a trap when you just knock things burn?
I guess, yes. You can also use the Grimhelmet to knock someone prone, but then you have 3 models in the fight. Yes, there are a lot of things you can do to get young Dwalin just killing a lot. Again, another solid option is to have a space support behind him. You're fighting a fight 3 army, or even maybe a fight 4 army, depending on what exactly you're fighting. Put him into 2 guys, have a spear behind him, drop his fight value, and you can still be higher fight than a lot of armies. Or at least matching. Like if you're in a really big race where you just need a lot of kills, like this is definitely an option to consider.
Yes.
Because rerolling all failed is really good.
Yes.
On a 3 attack hero, yeah, and especially having access to strength 6,
it's just amazing.
Yes. Like the strength 6 full rerolls, like that's killing power. That is very scary. And he also does have that strength. It also means if he strikes into something, goes to like fight 10. And then you can be like, cool, I'll do my super feint. If he's fighting like a fight 4, fight 5 hero without a strike, or who hasn't called a strike for whatever reason, you can just pop this and be like, I'm gonna kill.
Yes, and it's just a phenomenal rule to have on a model like this. The one thing I will say though is you said it already. He struggles to find a place in a lot of list just because of the other 4 heroes we've had already.
Yes.
I think that's the one thing, right? If this was a hero that was taken as part of a different army list, he would be one of those auto-include heroes.
Again, very similar to Thorin in that regard.
Yes, but the fact that he's in this list just makes it one of those weird models to try and fit in.
Yeah. All right, let's go on to some of our generic profiles now.
Yes.
With the Grimhammer Captain. All right, well, let's talk about him. So, Grimhammer Captain, Dwarf Erebor Infantry Hero, sitting at 70 points for a hero of Fortitude. He has a fight of 5, a strength of 4, a defense of 8, 2 attacks, 2 wounds, courage 5, 2 might, 1 will, 1 fate. He comes with heavy dwarf armor, a pick hammer, and a throwing axe. So the pick hammer, it's a weapon we're going to be talking about a lot because it's really good. It is a hand and a half weapon which may either use the bash or piercing strike special strikes. Probably 2 of the best, most commonly useful strikes.
Yes.
To make, I think. And he comes with, as all captains do, the heroic march. So, Grimhammer Captains, what do you reckon?
I think that this profile is amazing. To have the pick hammer, the availability of bashing, of two-handing, of piercing, of doing whatever you want with that weapon, as a 2-1-1 hero is phenomenal.
It is really good. I just thought that it'd be really cool if you could bring a Guardian of the King Grimhammer Captain.
Yes, that's the one thing I hear a lot of people talk about is why is he not strength 5? And I think it's stealing a little bit of thunder away from Dwalin if you're doing that, essentially.
Yeah, maybe. I get that. But still, it does make it a little bit weird. Yeah, he is very solid. Not too much to talk about because it's a fairly standard profile for a captain.
Yes.
Throwing axes with might behind them, pretty neat. It means if you just charge a horse hero and you throw your axe, you roll like a, for a wound, you'd be like, oh, I guess I'll just mount him,
Yes.
There's things you can do with him. There's some neat things, bashing. Although I think generally speaking, you don't want to bash your 2 attack models unless it's like very specific situations.
There's reasons for it.
There's reasons to do it, but again, yes, it's one of those lower. Being able to, two-hand and then use your might to hit a 6, that's pretty neat. I think that's actually probably one of the sort of bigger things he brings.
Yeah, definitely.
If you trap someone two-hand, there's killing power to be found on him.
Yes. He is importantly as well one of your 2 carriers of March in the list. So the availability of Heroic March in a dwarf list cannot be understated.
Especially one with no mounts.
Yes.
Yeah. Let's get on to the Grimhammer. All right, so the Grimhammer, we just talked about the captain. It's basically a mini version of the captain, right? So, Dwarf, Erebor, Infantry Warrior at 11 points, move value of 5, fight value of 4, strength value of sometimes 3, sometimes 4, as we talked about earlier. Defense of 7, 1 attack, 1 wound, and courage 4. Coming with heavy dwarf armor, pick hammer, and throwing axes, same as the captain. So, we were talking about the big hammer, why it's really good. It's even better on troops.
Yes.
Yes. So, as we said, they can be strength 3 or strength 4, depending on whether or not you bring Thror. I think if you bring Thror, you bring just basically everyone to strength 4. I think we pretty much agree on that.
Yeah.
And yeah, they're very solid troops. Very strong front line. The D7 makes them very tough. The strength 4 with piercing strikes and bashes. Again, the strength 4 makes bashes even better. It's essentially a +1 on every bash you do. For those who don't know what bash does, you basically declare a bash. If you win the fight, you and your opponent roll and then add your strength values. And the winner, if it's a draw, who wins if it's a draw?
The person who declared wins draws.
So if you roll equal or higher than your opponent, you knock them prone.
Yes.
Which traps them.
Importantly as well, if you choose to two-hand as the person who declared the bash, you get another +1 to it.
Yeah.
If your opponent two-hands, they don't get the +1 to it.
So essentially, two-handed bash is really good, isn't it?
If you're going to be bashing, there's a really solid argument to trying to two-hand with it. Obviously, you need to win that fight still. So if you're 1 or 2 dice, maybe you don't do it. But if I have this guy with a spear sport and an Erebor dwarf with a spear sport, I'm going to do a two-hand bash on that first strike.
Especially against mounted heroes. That's one of the best ways to dismount a big-name hero. It's essentially like a 50-50, and then you still get to make the rest of your strikes to your other guys.
Exactly. And importantly, you get to start these strikes by trapping them. So if you lead with that bash, you will knock them prone straight away. And if you have those 3 other dwarves, you resolve the other 6 dice straight away as trapped dice. It's fantastic.
Yeah, the ability to bash someone down and then just go crazy on them is really big.
Yes. I think when we talk about tempo, this is another one of those rules, being able to knock something to the ground to later set up for the following turn. I find that I do this quite a lot when I play. I will go for a lot more bashes than I do piercing strikes these days with my Grimhammers, just to try and force that tempo, so that if my opponent decides he needs to call the heroic move next turn to keep up with me, or if I decide that I need to knock you prone to keep you in that spot, you have to actually make that choice, right? Am I spending a point of might to only move 3 inches? Am I stuck on the ground and going to get double strike if I lose? Which means that the Grimhammer gets the 2-hand pierce for free next turn.
Yeah, it's really scary when you knock a hero over, and that hero, even if they win a fight, literally does nothing.
Yes.
Like, you essentially get to take their hero. If you win the bash roll off against a hero, you take them out of the game for a turn, essentially. On a 50-50. Like, if you win the priority next turn and get to charge them. If they get to stand up, that's whatever. But 50-50ing your opponent into losing a turn of their hero, pretty big deal.
Yes.
And if they don't win the fight, they're still down next turn. So it could be multiple turns of them just sitting on the ground.
Yes,
Getting their head caved in by these 2-handing Grimhammers. Like, that's really scary to deal with.
I played a game against a friend of mine who was playing a Rohan Legendary Legion. And the turn that he called death, I knocked 3 of his heroes to the ground. It was probably one of the most upsetting games we played in quite a while, but it just shows the strength of that list. Gamling goes prone. I think AMA went prone and Durnhelm went prone.
It just sounds like they rolled. Really
they did. They most definitively did.
The threat of that happening is a really big deal. Like, you can't understate that. Just like saying being unlikely doesn't make it not a threat.
Exactly.
It's scary to deal with. Yeah.
And so it's just one of those profiles that really gets to exploit the usage of a multifunctional weapon, right? And the other thing that we haven't really talked about yet is obviously that throwing axe. It's a phenomenal little addition to this profile and turns it from that like really, really solid profile to why is this only an 11-point profile?
It's move 5.
Yes, but
that's why. But yes, you're correct. Throwing axes are excellent. Like we talked, they essentially negate some of the downsides of being move 5. They still exist, as we talked about, once those lines meet, but it means there's less of an option for your opponent to just sit at 6 inches and just walk around and get to choose exactly where they fight for free. Now, at least there's like a 2 to 3 model tax from just throwing weapons, hitting them at max range.
Exactly, yes.
And so, this is dwarf across the board, but being Courage 4 is also just really nice as an addition.
Yes. I don't think we actually talked about this properly, and I guess we'll talk about it more when we get to the Warriors as well, as we round out the actual army selection part of it. But the Courage 4, Fight 4 is just such a reliable stat.
Yeah, having that across the entire army is just a really solid thing.
Yes.
Now, let's talk about the other captain for real this time. All right, take it away, Chris.
Yes, so we have, for 60 points base, a Dwarf Erebor Infantry Hero of Fortitude, and he is a Movement 5, Fight 5, 4+ Shoot. The 4+ Shoot doesn't do anything. He is a Strength 4, Defense 7 base, 2 attacks, 2 wounds, Courage 5, 2/1/1. And he comes with Dwarf Armor and an axe. I don't know why the actual captain model himself has 2 axes, but he only gets 1.
It looks cool.
It does look cool. I'll give you that.
He's a cool model. I gotta be honest. Yeah. I want one.
He's your other big hero in terms of being able to carry March. Being a captain profile, obviously that's what he'll get. And he has the war gear option of a shield for 5 points. So for 65 points, you can turn this model into a defense 8 shielding captain.
Yeah, so here, this is where the sort of choice between him and the Grimhammer comes in. Essentially, you're trading the throwing axes for the ability to shield. And it's a 5-point difference, not that... Like, the big hammer kind of makes up for it on being more versatile. But then you have to ask yourself the question, what is your captain there to do?
Yes.
And I think in this list, he sort of joins Thror in that roadblock role, more so than he does in, like, a killing role. You're letting Thrain, you're letting your Strength 4 Grimhammers do all the killing, and your captain is there to call marches and then to run into some medium-sized threat and just sit there tanking him, I think.
Yes. I remember very well one of the first games we played, where you were playing a army with Gandalf in it.
Yeah, it was a Lake Town list with Gandalf, and Gandalf charges this captain of Erebor, and every fight is Gandalf just like two-handing with Glamdring. He's two-handing with the big elven sword of doom.
Yeah, Glamdring. Yeah.
Glamdring, I said it right, cool.
Yep.
You know, calling strikes at this captain. This captain of Erebor just didn't die. It was like 4 turns of Gandalf just beating him over the head, just trying to take him out. And this captain just wouldn't die, and that's what, because he's a D8.
Yes, I remember I stayed prone. I never stood up.
You never hit me.
I was surrounded by like 3 other guys who were all trying to pierce and strike into me as well.
There were all these Lake Towners piercing, striking, spear supporting. It just didn't do anything.
And I think I did win that game for that exact reason.
No, I won that game.
Was it?
Yeah, I won that game by like 1 point.
Oh, that's right. Yes, but it was such a close game.
It was an absurdly close game because this captain just took Gandalf out of the... Gandalf could have been killing so many Grimhammers if this guy had just gone down.
Yes, and you set him up to kill him in 1 turn. He didn't die that turn and then just never died. And that's what this model does, right? Is if you bring this model instead of the Grimhammer Captain, you're bringing the roadblock. You're bringing the, I'm going to roll 4 dice every time I touch a hero. I'm going to rely on my fight 5. I'm going to use my might points to keep myself in the fight for as long as I can. I'm here to slow you down.
The shielding is the big deal there. Because if I was just charging a 2-attack captain, like the Grimhammer would be no matter what, I wouldn't feel the need to strike.
Yes.
You know, but if I'm charging a 4-attack guy, you know, even if I'm Elven made like I was with Gandalf in that game, it still feels really rough that, you know, you have 4 dice to roll a 6, you know, banner, 5 dice to roll a 6, and then it's going to be a roll-off. You know, it's sort of burnt, like the Grimhammer captain is good, but the captain of Erebor demands resources to kill.
Yes.
A lot more so than the Grimhammer captain does, because of the ability to go to 4 dice instead of just 2.
Yes. And although it doesn't seem like a huge deal, as someone who has played probably about the same number of games with either one, I found the Captain of Erebor profile to be the more reliable roadblock. And exactly what you said, right? It's the, I don't need another model that needs to get kills to find value. In an army like this, I actually value something that just slows you down more.
Yeah, exactly. It's about choosing what role he fills, and the Captain of Erebor fills a more useful role at that points level of a hero than the Grimhammer Captain does.
Yes. I will say, however, if you're playing a smaller scale game, I would bring the other captain, the Grimhammer Captain, more than I bring the Captain of Erebor, I think.
Yeah, I think at a small points level where there's fewer big heroes, those Thrain axes are going to add up. That being able to get the kills is going to add up. So yeah, they do both have options, but I think at 750, Captain of Erebor over Grimhammer basically every time, I think.
Yeah, I would argue so, yes.
Alright, on to our next profile, the Warrior of Erebor. So, very similar to our Grimhammers, but different in some slight ways. We've got a Dwarf Erebor Infantry Warrior sitting at 8 points, so 3 points cheaper than a Grimhammer base. Coming in at fight 4, move 5, strength 3, d6, 1 attack, 1 wound, and courage 4. Dwarf armor and axe as their war gear. So axes, very good. Going to strength 4 with piercing strikes, very good. For options, we have the Warhorn. Probably don't need one of those. The banner. You've got Thror, so don't worry about that. And then you've got spear and shield. These guys are going to be your spear and shields. I think you pretty much always bring a shield. I don't think you ever wouldn't. Again, it synergizes well with piercing strikes because it gives you a higher chance of not being affected by them as much. And it brings you to that D7, which... Let's talk a bit more about what D7 does.
Yes.
So most armies are strength 3. So against troops, D7 is... I mean, depends if you're fighting Uruk-hai or Morannons, it's got to be high impact. But the real impact is that a lot of heroes are strength 4. So D7 is going to lower your opponent's hero's killing power by a lot. And that is why I think you bring it on everyone. Because if you don't bring the shields on the spears in your back, those kind of mounted heroes who sit at strength 4 are going to be a threat to them. So that's why I think you bring shields basically always. And also, obviously, the upsides of being able to shield, and the upsides that come with, you know, being able to, you know, piercing strike with less risk, essentially.
Yeah, 100%. I think the shield is one of those very weird 1-point upgrades in that every army has it for 1 point, so it's okay, but otherwise it would be such a disproportionately priced war gear option because it gives so much to the profile. And I think going from defense 6 to defense 7, in my opinion anyway, is probably the biggest step in the entire game of defense values.
I'd argue 5 to 6 is bigger. That's probably debatable.
Yeah, I argue defense 6 and defense 7 is so huge because it means no matter what, you will find the use for defense 7. What I mean by that is if you're fighting an army who has an odd strength value on their troops, the heroes will almost always be an even strength value. And vice versa. If they're an even strength value, the heroes will almost always be an odd strength value. Which means that if it's strength 3 troops and strength 4 heroes, the heroes have a really bad day. If it's strength 4 infantry with strength 5 heroes, the infantry have a bad day. And that's what you have to basically play around, right? Do I need to pick if my defense 8 fight 6 heroes are blocking up the troops because the troops are the ones I can just munch through because I can do it? Or do I need to block the heroes because their strength 5 are going to kill my troops?
Yeah, essentially you put your heroes where your troops are weak.
Exactly, right?
Yeah. I think that's pretty good. And yes, Warriors of Erebor, very solid, very good. Like, as I was saying, I made that quick comparison earlier to a Gondor Warrior. But 1 point more, you're essentially already by base gaining a point of defense and a point of fight. You're losing that point of move, that's the big trade-off. But yes, Dwarven Warriors are extremely points efficient because that lost movement.
Yes.
And that's something that you really want to take advantage of by throwing out those PSs to get those kills, by blocking up heroes that are threat to them, so that doesn't matter as much. That kind of deal.
Yes, and I think the only other thing to really talk about with the dwarf army list is courage. So your 2 captains are courage 5. Every other hero that we talked about earlier was courage 6, and both of your infantry options are courage 4. That is phenomenal to have across the entire line, your lowest courage value being courage 4, because it means when you're playing into a Harbinger army, you still drop into a courage 3, which means that you're having actually not a terrible time. You're still having a bad time because it's terror.
Yeah.
But it's not dropping to courage 2.
Yeah, the drop from courage 3 to 2 is the biggest percentage drop on Harbinger.
Yes.
So you're not feeling it as much as a courage 3 army would. Yeah.
Exactly. And having that, like I said, as a baseline stat in an army, that basically feels like a free thing in the points value.
Yes.
It's just huge.
Yeah, I agree. Whereas Erebor, fantastic. Is there anything else to say on them? I think it's pretty good.
Yeah, I think that just about sums up.
That covers all our profiles. I think we're going to take a quick break, and then we'll get into a couple of lists we have and do our final closing thoughts.
Lovely. See you guys in a minute. Welcome back. So let's dive straight into our allies. As the army of Thor, you get 2 green allies. They are Iron Hills and Dale. What are your thoughts on these?
Well, we already talked about Dale being pretty good allies, didn't we?
Yes.
So if you guys want, during our Dale episode, we talked about a list that was a Army of Thor Dale alliance that had a pretty even split between the 2 armies, I'd say. Maybe it was like 60-40 on the Dale side. But I think it's a pretty solid place to go looking if you want to do that kind of alliance. I think that the Dale contingent brings bows, and so you want to bring a little bit more into them so you get a nice solid bow limit because of the way bow limit works in your ally.
Yeah.
But it's a pretty solid alliance. Our other alliance is Iron Hills. So Iron Hills can get us access to a couple of things. They give us access to crossbow shooting, very expensive at a very high points cost, but still gives us access to it.
Yeah.
And also give us access to cavalry in the form of both Dane, the big pigman himself, captains, chariots, and goat riders, which are all pretty solid, though they are quite expensive.
Yes, I think it's a really interesting dilemma between which one of those allies you go with if you want to go with a green ally. Both of them offer you that shooting. Obviously, one of those shooting profiles is significantly better than the other, but the Iron Hills, although it doesn't have the better shooting, it comes with the perks of having cavalry. And most importantly, a cavalry hero.
A very powerful cavalry hero, as we'll get into as we talk about the list. But yes, I think yellow allies, you could maybe make some arguments. You obviously wouldn't bring Thror if you go yellow, because you have no army bonus anyway.
Yeah.
I can't think, there's probably some pretty solid yellow alliances you can do if you're looking at that.
So one that I really is... No, okay. Hear me out,
I'm hearing. I'm deaf, but I'm hearing.
So what you do is you do Thrain and Balin, right?
Yep.
You bring a few troops, not too many. I haven't worked out all the points properly with it. But then you just bring 3 other models, right?
Oh, God.
It's just Treebeard and 2 Ents, okay? Don't worry about it, okay? It's just Treebeard and a pair of Ents, right? And it's fine because Treebeard's your leader, so you can still use Thrain as your assassin, right? And then Balin is safe as your Fog of War hero. It's perfect.
You know what the problem is?
What?
You have axes.
Oh, yeah, you're right. I don't want to chop down my own trees. They'll be a bit upset.
Oh, yeah, that's upsetting. I don't want to think about this list. But there you go. For all of you, it's for Tom Draw, isn't it?
Yeah, it's for Tom Draw.
Okay, well, listen. For all of you out there...
Mr. Drew, come on.
Mr. Drew,
yeah.
Sorry. For all of you out there looking for some weird, wacky alliances, there you go. Chris has you covered.
Yeah, exactly. You have a couple of weird allies in the yellow ally pool.
Is that really yellow? I don't...
Yeah, it's one of those weird ones. But anyway, I think with yellow allies, essentially your toss-up is... Do you want to bring Thor and the army bonus, or do you just want to bring dwarves into something else? And I think pretty much if you're bringing this army list, you're basically going to stick to either your green allies, or you're going to be doing like a triple dwarf themed style list, or something a bit funky like that.
More wacky, yeah.
Yeah.
I definitely think that the green allies are solid options here, though.
Yes. I think, being realistic, your best allies is Dale or Iron Hills, with or without the army bonus add-ons. And so I personally don't see many reasons to go outside of those.
You have a very powerful army bonus unless you want to use it, essentially, is where I'm at. Like, getting a 6-inch banner is very powerful.
Yes, it's a free banner. That's the big thing, right? And having a 12-inch bubble from your king is fantastic. And I think, like, if you look at it as you're getting 50 points worth of stats for free, That's just amazing, right? Why would you not want to pay 50 points less in your list building?
It doesn't quite work out that way because you don't get the points in scoring on missions, and it's a little bit less versatile. But yes,
and
you're getting a very powerful effect added on for free.
Yeah, exactly that. And so yeah.
All right, let's get onto the list. So this is the list that I got given to write, which was the Bring a Pig Man. So I wanted to, with this list, we brought Thror, the obvious edition. We have 13 Guardians of the King. Balin, we have 5 Erebor warriors with spear and shield. Dane Ironfoot on the boar with 5 Iron Hill dwarves with spear, 1 Iron Hill dwarf with a spear and banner, 3 goat riders, and 4 spear and crossbow dwarves, bringing us to 34 models, 7 might, 4 bows, and the 4 priority rolls coming from Balin and Thror. So this list, the strengths on this list are you have 2 banners, a 6-inch and a 3-inch. The reason for this edition was basically the Thror army bonus only targets Erebor dwarves, which means if you're going to bring a decently large Iron Hills contingent, you can mix and match the dwarves. So have, generally speaking, you'd want a Iron Hill dwarf matched with a Erebor dwarf, so you always get a reroll.
Yeah.
But I wanted to bring a pretty hitty cav contingent as well in this, with Dane and the 3 goat riders. That is a lot of killing power on a charge, on a flank, and combined with the Balin and Thror rerolls, you can get the charges you want, essentially. That's the reason that Balin is in here as well. Dane brings your march, and Dane also brings that, since you're green, he brings that army bonus where he gets the 4+ Master of Battle.
Yes. And I think the addition of Dane with the 4 rerolls a priority is what makes this army so dang powerful. Because your opponent wants to be calling moves to try and stop that momentum, especially if they know that Dane's in an awkward foot and has to be able to do something to actually get out of that space. You call that reroll, you get up on that priority roll, you make them blow a move, and then Dane can snatch it out.
You're essentially getting a whole bunch of extra chances to get free might.
Yes.
That's what you're trying to abuse with this list. You're trying to put your opponent in a position where they really want to call a move, and Dane is within 6. The tricky part is you need to put Dane within 6 of a hero. If your opponent has a cheap hero, they're going to try and hide him away. So you really want to work on shepherding their heroes to being near Dane. That's something you need to watch out for with this. Because the 3 goats and Dane are a big part of this list. That's a lot of points, and you really want to get the most you can out of it. That's the sort of tricky part. You're on a relatively low model count here, only 31 warriors with 3 heroes, and one of them is a fairly weak hero with Balin. Yeah. So you really need to max out what you're doing with Dane and what you're doing with the Goat Riders.
And I think that's the really important thing to consider there, is that your 3rd hero is only Balin. It's not going to be someone that's actually going to be that relevant to the killing power of your list. He is the definition of a support hero. He is fantastic at doing that supporting role for these other 2 really big heroes.
And the goats. He's enabling the goats as well.
And he also enables the goats. That's also another big thing to not shy away from either. It's this, Balin is this map-wide pressure point, right? And for 55 points, he does it fantastically. We've talked about it heaps already. But I think the really, really powerful part about this list working together is that double banner, right? You can have Thor off on one side, leading the mostly Guardian of the King side of it with some spears and that sort of stuff with Iron Hills. And on the other side, you have that second banner with Dane going absolutely ham, mulching things.
Yeah, I think it's also very very easy to underestimate having 2 banners and the impact that has on what you can do to your opponent. If your opponent's stuck on 1 banner, it's very easy to pressure. It's very easy to put in a position where you have a lot of fights where you're on double banner. Sorry, when you're on banner and they're not. Yeah. Especially with your 6-inch banner and a 3-inch banner combined. Like, that's a lot of coverage. So I think that this list is a bit trickier, I think, than the next list we're going to talk about to get the most out of, because of the lower model count and because the reliance on the goats and the Dane to do a lot of work. But I think it is very solid. Also with Stock, there are 4 crossbows in the list. They are very solid to set off on the flank. You've got Dane giving them the fearless if you need to keep them on board. Very solid objective holders. Just gives a little bit of versatility to the list.
Exactly that, right? If you're playing the objective game, they're the models that do it. If you're playing the, storm the camps, if you're playing the death, cards, yeah. If you're playing any of those missions that don't really force a huge amount of movement into the crossbow threat ranges, then it's something that can be a bit trickier sometimes to use.
But they were spears. You can just put them into your line in the second rank. They're still D6.
Yes.
So they're still pretty tough to beat. And you just put them as spear supports and strength 4. Yeah. They're still solid, even if they're not crossbowing. And then if you're playing against an army that has no shooting or very low shooting, you just sit them in your line. You try to pop a horse or 2 under a hero, and they join in the fights.
Yes, I almost look at these crossbows almost like a mortal orc bow, right? It's there because if it works, and if you get the chance to set it up and get that shot, it makes your opponent sweat. Right?
Yes, they're just a little threat that forces your opponent to come where you want to be.
Yes. They're not always going to be in a position where they'll be useful. In fact, you'll get games where you might not even be able to fire shots at them properly, if at all.
Yeah, if you're outshot, they should just join your line and run up with you, essentially.
And that's when it's one of those ones of you're using Dane to call a march, you need to just cross that board, you need to start putting that pressure down. Because this, much like the other army, the rest of the army I should say, sorry, is a meat grinder once the combat's meat. And you need to just get into the combats to get the full effectiveness. So the crossbows are there to help incentivize it if it's a low shooting army, or if it's a strength 2 shooting army. Because into this list, strength 2 shooting is going to be doing 6s by 4s to hurt the Erebor dwarves, and it's going to be 6s by 5s to hurt the Iron Hills dwarves.
In a shield wall. Although we should mention that the spear dwarves will actually be really vulnerable to shooting. So that is the unfortunate thing with that exact matchup.
Yes. But it just means that you have so much. Essentially, you can just ignore shooting.
You can, yes. It'll take a long time for the biggest threat from the shooting is killing your boar.
Yes.
As you found out when Dane dismounted on turn 1.
Yes. But that was, what was it, 14 crossbow
It was like 14 crossbows with like 5 throwing knives. It was a lot.
Yes. And so it's like, yes, you can be scared of shooting, but it has to be a lot of shooting, and it has to be concentrated shooting.
And it has to be either strength 3 or strength 4.
Yes.
To be a real threat.
Strength 2, you can pretty much ignore. And I mentioned that earlier in the slides, although we didn't really talk about it. But Strength 2, you literally can ignore for the most part when you're walking forward. If you lose models to it, shake your opponent's hand and say, wow, you rolled well. If you didn't lose models, you look at them and say, you rolled about average. Sorry, buddy.
you rolled 30 dice, you did 1 wound. Cool. That's normal. That's
like, you take 1 or 2 model trade, and then you watch the trades go back the opposite way once combat is joined.
Once you start throwing accident.
Exactly, right? It's one of those ones where you will cop a couple of losses, whatever, move past it. This army still has 34 models. It can absorb a couple of kills. Obviously not too many, but you can absorb that quite comfortably, I think.
As you mentioned, both these lists are 750 points exactly.
Yes, exactly that as well, yes.
Yeah. All right, and on to your list. Go ahead, hit us with it.
Yes, so this is the list that I run these days when I play this army. It has Thror leading a warband of 13 Kingsguard, Guardians of the King. You then get Thrain leading 6 Warriors of Erebor with Spear and Shield, 2 Warriors of Erebor with Shield. You then get Balin leading the exact same complement of the 6 Warriors Spear Shield, 2 with just the shield, and a Captain of Erebor with a shield, and he's leading again 6 Spear Shields and 2 Warriors of Erebor. There is 41 models in the entire list, 9 points of might, 4 priority rerolls.
This is a very solid list. Like, it's a lot of very tough models. 3 very solid fighting heroes. Captain of Erebor, you know, like you said, he's either a really solid roadblock, or if not, like, he can just go in, you know, call some kills. You know, he'll do what a captain does.
Yeah, get that 1 kill every turn or every second turn.
Yeah, depending on what you're fighting.
Yeah, just be reliable. Exactly.
One of the interesting things with this list is the way you can move around your warbands depending on what missions you're playing. If you're going to an event where you know there's no Maelstrom, something that's really cheeky that you can do is you can put no models in Balin's warband, just put him somewhere behind a building, and you essentially get extra information for free by doing that.
Yes, and you literally took the words right out of my mouth, because I do that all the time when Alexa and I play.
It's the Alfred effect.
Yes. So essentially what you do in this circumstance is you move 4 of your spears into Thror's warband, and then you give 2 of the sword and boards to the Captain of Erebor, and the 2 other spearmen to Thrain's warband. The reason why I break it up like that is it lets Thrain drop down with a high density of spearmen. He has 8 spears in the warband, if you do it like that. That either sits on top of Thror's warband or on top of the Captain's warband. He's the last drop usually, and you can pivot which way he goes with it. Thror will still get the 4 spears. Whilst it's not a huge number, it's enough. And the Captain has 6 spears and 4 sword and boards. Again, it's that's probably about the right number for that warband to function on its own, if I choose to drop it like that.
Yeah, but obviously if you're playing with all missions available and there's the possibility of having to play a Maelstrom mission, I think it's better to stick like this. You don't want Balin deploying off on the corner all on his lonesome and then getting ganged by like 30 dudes, dying before he gets to do any priority rolls. So yeah, you just want to avoid having to deal with that. But yes, if you know the mission pool, you know there's no Maelstrom, definitely worth considering. Just dropping Balin on his own, just getting free info on your opponent, and just getting to, just getting to choose how the fights happen, getting to choose where you're gonna make your whole line just go.
Exactly. Yes. There are two big weaknesses of this army that I felt, other than the movement. That is that I don't have a banner. So obviously there's a few missions floating the boat these days that do require points scored with an actual banner. I have a pseudo banner.
It's unfortunate, but it's the price you pay when you get one of these heroes. That's just how it is. We can make arguments on whether it's good or not, but yes, it's unfortunate. Yes. That being said, those missions are fairly rare, and you're just going to play to win the rest of the mission. Exactly. Try to snipe the banner if you can with a hero. Try to just even the points out on that trade.
Yes.
You just have to work extra hard to get that.
Yes, and if you do really want to change this list to bring a physical banner, the way you do it is you drop 2 Guardians of the King, so you have 11 models in Thor's warband, and you turn one of your spear and shield dwarves into just a shield dwarf. And that gets you exactly 25 points. You can put it either on a Guardian of the King, or you can put it onto one of your dwarves.
Yeah, that's actually a solid option in general. Double banners. I've recently been really taking a liking to having 2 models with a banner attached.
Yes, and that would still leave your model count total at 39 models. It's not by any means a low model count. I would say that's pushing towards that pseudo horde style model count. So
it's a very solid model count either way. Yeah, I think that's actually a decent option. If you're someone who really enjoys having double banner or playing really wide, it also just opens, that's another thing to consider, is it opens Thror a lot more. It lets Thror go wherever because when you have him as your banner, he's kind of changed your line. He's forced to go where he gets the most models possible.
Yeah.
If you bring that second banner, you kind of free Thror up to go wherever he wants. You limit your opponent's options to sort of force him into bad spots to, because you have to think about how to pay back his points as a banner and pay back his points as a hero. When you have that second banner, you're less forced to do that, and he's just more free to, look fighting heroes, looking to shut down heroes, looking to pick up, kills across the line.
Yeah, exactly that. And I think if you're bringing a second banner into the list, it'd be worth considering changing that captain of Erebor back into a Grimhammer captain.
Yeah, that's actually a solid option there as well, yeah.
Yeah. It just gives you flexibility, I think, having
the 5 points make it really annoying.
That is true. I think at that point you would probably rewrite the entire list.
You would. But yes, I think it's a solid way to think about it. Is you can make a very similar list like this, bring that extra banner, free Thror up, play a wider line more reliably.
Yes. The way I personally like to play is to just absolutely clump all my troops up into that death ball and kind of have that 1 or 2 big breakout turns. So for those reasons, I'm actually pretty comfortable playing in that big tight block with all my heroes within 6 inches of each other. I actually try to keep Thrain, Thror, and the Captain of Erebor all within 5 inches. So essentially what that means is you have Thor dead center, you have your Captain 3 or 4 inches off on one side, and you have Thrain 3 or 4 inches off on the other side. So that any of my heroes can move in a way to cover the spot of another hero, or to just cover and assist another hero. And I think playing the list like that keeps everything under the umbrella of that banner, and it keeps that killing power in the front of your ranks. If you have the fight advantage as well, it means that your opponent has to be scared about fighting anywhere across about a 12-inch block in your line, because they know that one of your Fight 6 heroes could reach them.
Yeah, this list is a very hard list to approach in a straight-up fight. You have to, outmaneuver it. You have to get, some sort of traps. You have to get a couple turns where you sort of abuse that movement of the dwarves. Because if you just fight it straight up, you're just going to get beat. It's very hard to beat this many dwarves in a, front-to-back scenario.
Yeah, 100%. I think the way that this list excels the most is getting within that throwing axe range and just not engaging until your opponent's ready to. Because you will start to win that shooting engagement more and more and more and more as you stand right in front of them with those throwing axes.
Yeah, there are very few things that can outdo 13 dwarven throwing axes in terms of trading back efficiently with shooting.
Yes.
Short of like a Dale or like a crossbow heavy list, it's going to be very tough. And even then, it's actually probably not great mathematically. If the D6 on the dwarves, since with the Knights of Dale being D6, it's pretty decent.
Yeah, I was gonna say it actually works about at equity now that you have the D6 profile in there.
But even then, that's still it's not great. You don't feel great about taking that kind of even trade back.
Yeah, especially since you know that the combats are going to go more and more in the dwarven favor the longer a game goes.
Because the strength 4 and the piercing strikes and all that. Yeah,
the way the math just works, the longer the games go, the longer combats can go for, the better this list functions. And I think that's probably something we should jump into as we jump into our final thoughts.
Yeah, so what do we overall think about this list?
Yeah, so I think that this army is the definition of a my front will crunch yours. If this army gets to play fair, and by fair I mean if we both play front to back, heroes slap heroes, troops slap troops, all that sort of stuff happening, all the heroics popping off, all the priority rerolls, the throwing axes, this army will build a lead, will snowball a lead, and will end the game in 4 turns.
Yeah, this list is a very, without trying to sound too demeaning, it is very one note. That's sort of its greatest strength and its greatest weakness. It's a very simple list to play. You just walk forward and you hit your opponent and you just go, cool, I hope you have some sort of answer to this that isn't just fighting me.
Yes, and I think that's the real secret, right? When you're playing on the other side of the table to any Dwarven force, but especially one with the Guardians of the Kings, is how do I approach this line and force it to not fight me the way it wants to? And I think that's the really hard part to figure out, because I don't think there are many armies that can force it to do it like that.
It just depends on the matchups, yeah. Like, it's very hard to give like an overall guide to beating this list in a straight fight. You know, if you're a fight 5 army, you can feel okay fighting it, you know, or if you've got like a really, really high model count and you can maybe try to get some traps on it, there are ways to deal with it. But if you just try to meet it on its own terms, there's very few armies that can go toe to toe, you know, line to line against this list.
Yes. I actually had a really hard game against a terror-based Mordor list. So it ran a Mordor Troll Chieftain with Shagrat and Kandush as some of its big centerpiece models, and then it also had a front of Black Numenorians. That list gave me a real run for my money, because it had a lot of movement shenanigans, and it had a lot of ways of moving the heroes that I needed to be in certain places into places they didn't want to be, with a Fight 7 Troll Chieftain and with access to a Ringwraith and Kadush. The magic was just really oppressive, and because I dropped to courage value of 3 across my line, I wasn't making all the charges I wanted to. I rolled a lot of 9 total courage checks, and because of that, a lot of Guardians of the King never threw an axe, never reached combat, and then the ones that did were on a 3v1 and got ground down.
Yeah, but that's the thing. You do need to find tricks against this list. You need to find little exploits against the dwarves. You need to not fight it on its own terms.
Yes.
But when this list gets to play its game, it is just terrifying to just watch it, because you know, most lists, if they have a bad turn where they lose a lot of fights, it'll hurt. Against this list, it can take a bad turn and live, and if you get a bad turn against it, it'll just annihilate you.
Yes. I played games where I've broken my opponent in 3 turns. Like, from I dealt 0 kills because they were shooting at me and I wasn't in range, to we reached combat, and in those first 3 turns of combat, I went from maybe 1 kill off a throwing weapon prior to I just broke you, let's start rolling for the game end next turn.
Yeah. Alright, I think this is a really great list to play. It's very simple to play, you know, it's very fun to play, has a beautiful model range. I think that sums up my thoughts on this list.
Yes, and I think the one final thing I'll say about this list is the way that this list scales in points values means that you can really play it at basically any points. 300 points, I think my favorite way of running this list is just running Thror with 15 Guardians of the King. That is literally a throwing draw on the dot. And then anything past that, you can just scale up and down those ratios and start bringing in other heroes. And which hero you bring depends entirely on how you want to play the game. Do you want that really powerful killing power? 85 points. Bring Dwalin. Do you want that big beat stick hero that's fight 6, 3 might, 3 wounds, 3 fate, is gonna be a thorn in the side of the opponent's army? Bring Thrain. Bring something that's gonna force your opponent to make hard decisions. Bring Balin. Like, there's always that answer to how you want to play and how your individual meta in the gaming group you're part of, in the area you live in the whatever that space sort of is, where you actually do need to make hard decisions about what models you bring, because it will change radically how this list actually functions into that meta.
Yeah, alright. Alright, thanks guys. Thank you for listening. Thank you for sticking around if you were here from the start. Yeah, anything final to say? Like and subscribe. Yeah. Make Eric happy.
Yes. Obviously, you don't have to do any of those things. It's something that's entirely your choice. It would support us heaps. We'd love to hear some feedback. especially about the way our visuals are presented. Do you want to see our faces? Do you want to see some demonstrations of more models? Do you want to see different images? Do you want to see whatever it is? Tell us what you'd like to see. Tell us what you think we've done well. All that sort of stuff. And of course, if this is something you've enjoyed, feel free to give it a like. Feel free to give us a subscribe if you want to see more content from us. And if you have people that you think might enjoy this, feel free to share it.
Yeah, that'd be very much appreciated.
Yeah.
Thank you guys so much for listening, and we'll see you all next time.